everyone, my name is Eric North, and today I'm going to be giving my presentation on Apple Inc. I'm just going to start out by giving you a brief history of the company with some dates about more people that are involved with the company, and then I'm going to give a brief overview of products and the dates that they came out and the evolution of the products that have been in and currently are in Apple Inc. So the first date that's significant is 1976. This is when Wozniak and Steve Jobs founded Apple Computer Inc. And it began with Wozniak creating the first computer of its kind, and Steve Jobs kind of encouraged him to begin selling it, and so they decided to team up because Jobs was interested in computers as well. And so they decided to team up and create Apple Inc. In 1980, this was when Apple became the first publicly traded personal computer company on the market. And then you move forward to 1982, and they were the first personal computer company to be worth $1 on the stock market. If you could imagine, if you had invested a lot of money back then, their stock is upwards of $150 a share now. So they've definitely done pretty well in that realm. And then 1985, John Sculley became the CEO of the company, and that name kind of puts a little bit of a sour taste in some people's mouth when you talk about Apple, because there was kind of a tussle between him and Steve Jobs at one point that moved Steve Jobs off of some of the product development in Apple. In 1997, Steve Jobs became the CEO of Apple, and in 1998, this is when they released the first all-in-one Mac computer. If you remember them, they were kind of see-through and had different colors, red, blue, green, and it was the first computer that had gone away from the hard drive and motherboard of the computer being in the tower. Then this computer, they had it built all into one. And then in 2000, this is when Jobs became the full-time CEO. Before, he was just the interim CEO, but now he was the full-time CEO, and this is when development in Apple really started to pick up, was the early 2000s. As you remember, they came out with the iPod and the iPad in the early 2000s, and those were huge products for them. In 2011, Steve Jobs died, and a few years prior to that, they had a man by the name of Tim Cook be the CEO for the company, just the interim CEO, and then in 2011 he took over full-time as the CEO for the company. And a lot of people will say that this was kind of a slow moment for Apple. The innovation kind of slowed down, and they didn't come out with a lot of new innovative products, and they say that was because Steve Jobs was the mastermind behind Apple. But as we'll discuss later in the presentation, Tim Cook is starting to bring back that innovation with new and exciting upcoming products. Alright, so this next part we're going to talk a little bit about some of the early innovations of Apple and the products that they came out with leading up until today. So as we mentioned earlier, the story of Apple starts in 1976, and Apple was the very first company to release a home computer. And as you now know, Apple is a multinational corporation that creates consumer electronics, computer software, and commercial servers. The founder, Steve Wozniak, he was a brilliant engineer, and he developed his own home computer, at which was the very first of its kind. Steve Jobs, he was a very good friend of Wozniak, was also interested in computers and urged Wozniak to sell his very first home computer. Jobs and Wozniak decided to start their business, which was Apple Inc., on April 1st, 1976. So the very first computer they came out with was called the Apple I, and it was released on that day when they started the business, so April 1st, 1976. And it was the very first computer to use a keyboard. And the way it was used, it was a wooden box with a keyboard, and no screen, and it was meant to be used by hooking it up to a TV, and that was your computer screen. The Apple II came out just a year later, April 16th of 1977, and it was the first 8-bit home computer. And it was a very successful product for them, and they sold a lot of them. And it was primarily designed by Wozniak off of the first computer that he built. It was a very successful product for them. So let's see, the Apple III is next, and it was a business-oriented personal computer that was intended as the successor of the Apple II series, but largely considered to be a failure in the market. The Apple II was such a popular computer that when the Apple III came out, it wasn't nearly as sought after as the Apple II in the business world. The next one was the Apple Lisa, and this started to be developed in 1978, and it was finally released in 1983, so it took them quite a while to develop this product. It was the very first computer to use a graphical user interface, or a GUI, and this was the use of a mouse to select on-screen buttons. That's what a GUI is. And it was targeted more towards business customers instead of home and personal computers. And one thing that Apple struggles with today is cost to some people. And with this product, that was the downfall of it. It was a highly expensive computer, and not many people could afford it. For the sake of time, we're going to skip a little bit forward and not go over today's technology for Apple, since most of us already know what that is. And we'll jump into a little bit of the meat of the presentation and tie Apple into some of the things we've been reading about in some of our books. One thing that has really stuck with me from the book Predictably Irrational was the chapters on the effects of expectations and the power of price, which were chapters 10 and 11. These are a couple of topics that influence the buyers of Apple products very heavily. Apple has established itself as one of the top companies in several main technology markets and is known for the quality and performance of its products, but not without an inflated price. This is what ultimately has made Apple so successful and lucrative in this market. Quality and performance almost always equal high revenues. In Predictably Irrational, they perform an experiment in a bar at a college, if you remember. The experiment had to do with expectations. The experiment was conducted to see how ordering beer and food around your peers would influence what you order based upon what others around you had already ordered. This all ties into the issue of wanting to fit into the crowd and people ultimately losing their creativity, personality, and originality. This aspect plays a huge part in certain businesses succeeding and other businesses failing in their tasks and their certain markets. As you analyze Apple from the standpoint of the experiment mentioned above, you will find some keys to success that will help any business in any industry succeed. These attributes are originality and functionality. These attributes will be the deciding factor as to whether Apple will come out on top in some markets or not. Up to this point in their history, they have come out with some original ideas that have really helped them be successful. Those examples would be the iPod or the iPad and their highly technical innovations in laptops and desktops, and now they've come out with the Apple Watch, so wearable technology. I think a great idea for Apple would be to sit down, as they suggest in the book, and write down ideas that won't be influenced by other companies' products and ideas, and won't be influenced or judged immediately by those co-workers and peers around them. I really like the quote at the end of chapter 10. It reads, "As it turns out, positive expectations allow us to enjoy things more and improve our perception of the world around us. The danger of expecting nothing is that in the end, it might be all we'll get." Expectations are high in every retail market. This is something Apple has been successful at in the past and needs to continue to stay at the top of technology markets. To finish out the presentation, we'll just go over a quick SWOT analysis of and analyze Apple's business as it currently stands. Some of the strengths that Apple currently has is: 1, it has a very strong brand image; 2, it has high profit margins; and 3, it has an effective innovation process, which is coming back under the direction of Tim Cook. Some of the weaknesses that Apple is currently facing is: 1, limited distribution network; 2, high selling prices; 3, sales limited mainly to high-end market. These last two are key points. As we mentioned above, their high profit margin is a plus for them, but it can also be their Achilles heel and be a hindrance as well. One thing that Apple's kind of missing is a little bit of a lower end product that appeals to more people. Most other businesses have that, and that's something that Apple should possibly look into developing in the future. Some of the opportunities that Apple currently has is to expand their distribution network; 2, rising demand for tablets and smartphones; and 3, creation of new product lines. That last one is crucial to them. They haven't come out with a lot of new innovation or new products lately, and I think that's something that Tim Cook is really focusing on. For the sake of time, we don't have the time to go over automated technology that Apple's coming out with, namely with cars. But if you have a minute, for sure reach out and look at what Apple is doing with self-driving cars, and they're teaming up with Hertz in order to perfect that technology that they're making. And last, the threats that are facing Apple is aggressive competition, imitation of their products. There's always fakes coming out of China. And 3, rising labor costs in countries where Apple plants are located. So that's going to be more expenses for them. And just in closing, Apple has built a very successful brand in the eyes of many people across the world, based heavily on the attributes that we mentioned in this presentation, which are originality and functionality. If Apple can continue to keep these as the focus of their current products and the products that are currently being developed, they stand a great chance of continuing to be a leader in the technology world and have a solid customer base that will support any new product that is released with that simple yet very successful Apple logo that is on every product they make. Thank you for listening to my presentation.